Hello, viewer on YouTube. Where are you? You're there. Lovely to see you. I'm so excited for you to join me and my friend Sarah. Sarah's just bloody awesome, and I cannot wait. No worries. I can't wait for you to jump into this conversation with us. And YouTube viewer, let's send some great vibes. I don't know, whatever the kids say, because this is Sarah's first time on a podcast.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
I'm much better knowing that you're here with me. You've been really good at helping me calm down and forget what I'm doing, so thank you.
Perhaps unwisely, I have given us both fully leaded tea.
It's going to help. I hope.
We're going to be breaking out in cold sweats, speaking like the chipmunks.
Whatever works, right?
We're going to be maniacal by the end of this. Yeah. So, viewer, just awesome to have you here. And I always forget to say this, but you've got to do the things. You've seen YouTube videos before, like, subscribe, do all of the things. But do it, don't do it. It's just great to have you here. And so let's get into it. Sarah, you good?
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you.
And so by the magic, this is not over Zooms. We're in the same room.
He's right there.
Oh, I know. It's awesome.
Incredible.
You good?
I am good.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're on YouTube, are you good? Okay. I'm gonna say that you say good. And I'm gonna press record on here. I've already done the intro. I don't need to look at you there. I can look at you there.
Oh, yeah.
It's
look at me here, Phil. I'm right here. I've got you.
gotta hide on the other side.
I'm so glad I can't see myself when I do that. But I'm really grateful I can see you straight ahead.
It's very odd. Dr Sara Quinn, welcome to Connection Over Coffee.
Thank you. I feel like I'm in trouble when I get called doctor.
Really?
Yeah, it's funny.
Oh, okay. I might have to edit the intro because I'm just
No, do it. No, I feel like I should own it, right?
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get it. But
yeah. No, you earned it.
Still. Yeah.
You earned it. So, yeah, you got to, yeah. So, Dr. Sarah it is.
I was supposed to say Dr. Phil, but that might...
No.
We know other Dr. Phils and we don't need to do that.
No. And Sarah, I'm just so chuffed that you're here because we have the best chats.
Thank you.
And it's just, I feel like I don't want to jinx this episode because, but I reckon if we could just get half or even a quarter of the awesomeness that we get as some cars go past, then that's going to be awesome because we're going to talk about loneliness in this episode.
One of my favourite topics.
Really?
Yeah.
Mine too.
Well, yeah. Right. Funny that, isn't it? Funny that we've come together to talk about loneliness together. That's why our conversations are so awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So, before we get into that kind of, accidental awesomeness that characterises just both of us, who are you? Who are you? How did you get to be sitting right on the other side of our kitchen table here?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really hard question to answer when someone says, who are you?
I know. I'm just going to sit and enjoy the squirm.
Thank you. So I often, when I have to answer that question, I often think of the roles that I have. So I think... I automatically think clinical psychologist because I'm here, talking as a psychologist about loneliness. But then I think, that's not who I am at heart. Who I am at heart is I'm a mum, I've got 2 teenagers, they're pretty fun, keep it real. I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague. I'm someone who I would say is a humanist. So I like being around humans and making sure that we treat each other as, without the labels that we give ourselves all the time. But who am I? I have fun. When I think of actually, when I have to describe some of this to some of the people that I've taught in the past. Often I think of Mount Wellington, which is a beautiful mountain that we have, which is now called Kunyani, in Hobart. And when I feel at my most at peace, that's where I am. So that for me, that's who I am. I'm someone who enjoys the outdoors, but I enjoy being home, and home is where I feel like I'm surrounded by those that I love, and I'm looking after those that I love in a place that I love. And that's like here, Phil, because I'm at full circle, is that I really enjoyed our conversation. So you make me feel like who I'm supposed to be.
Oh, that's like I completely understand what you're saying in terms of like the feeling at ease as a feeling of home. And on my other podcast, the Lonely Diplomat podcast, the theme of home, pardon me, the theme of home is something that comes up all the time, because when you're abroad, when you're living as a diplomat for 3, 4, 5 years, like wherever you're living is home, but when you're there, you're not home because the locals don't think of you as from there, and you know you're not from there. And then ironically, when you go back, when you go home, you don't feel at home because the home's changed. And
so have you.
So I think that concept of home and where we find it is like a rich vein in itself for how we feel connected. But I remember saying to Jeff soon after we declared love for each other, it was just like one of the things that still to this day, it's the feeling of home that we give each other and within the family, that helps us be who we are as we are.
Authentically. Without even trying. It's a nice feeling, isn't it?
And I wonder, like, how, I'm sure smarter people than I have studied this as well, but I just can't think of anything, and I'm hoping you can.
Now the pressure's on.
But the sense of connection to self, which when we don't feel connected to who we are, this is going deep really quickly.
Have a sip of a really hardened tea. Prepare myself.
Steel yourself. Because we if we don't feel connected within ourselves, we can feel like a sense of loneliness. And that was certainly characteristic of my loneliness when I, realized that I was lonely. And so I wonder how, like, if we can cultivate a sense of home within ourselves, how that can actually help us feel connected to ourselves, wherever we are and however we are in the world. Do you know of anything that's like been said, written, studied about that? Like,
well, look, I want to be able to, whip up a reference for you, but
as opposed to just being Google, I could Google it.
Thanks, Phil. When you say that, what I think about is, really getting to know yourself, and I think that often where we feel our most authentic is where we drop our guards, and we no longer have to pretend to be something that we think others want us to be, right? So I think that the process of being able to get to know who you are without having to fulfill anyone else's expectations of us, and if we learn what we want from our own lives rather than having to be a certain way for others, I think that's where we can achieve that feeling of belonging just as we are, and that homeliness that comes from that feeling. So, but that requires, sometimes a lot of courage, because really turning around, putting that mirror up against, our own face rather than sort of facing that out to others takes a lot of courage, I think. So I would say a process of reflection. I know self-reflection is often something that we would focus on quite a lot when it comes to, working with someone in a clinical sense, or in our psychology's practice. And when we see people start to self-reflect and understand themselves better, they end up feeling more at ease wherever they are, whomever they're with, and they end up making those choices consistently with who they want to be in the future. So that's what I would say to
Yeah.
answer that question.
Yeah. What an awesome answer.
I don't want to listen to it again.
Yeah. I'll edit out the awesomeness. Viewer, listener, wasn't that great? And if there's any lingering question about why Sarah's here, let that just chase those away. But it is just that sense of, it does take so much courage to allow ourselves to find out who we are. And loneliness to me is, and I say this a fair bit, that loneliness is our body's way, imperfect, pretty shitty, way of getting our attention to say that we're not getting connection in some way, shape or form that we actually really need. And our job as humans who experience loneliness, however we identify as a human, is to pause a moment and listen to the loneliness and tell us because it's trying to tell us in its awful way. It's trying to. It's our body's way of giving us the signal, just like hunger or thirst gives us signals about something. And I just feel that those cockatoos outside are just going to
they want to join in.
They're thwarting
That's interesting that you thought that straight away, Phil. They were really joining in. They were celebrating what it was that you were saying.
I just think the cockies need to have their inside voice when we're recording. But yeah, it is. Just this. It's a pretty awful way that our body has evolved. And let's go there, because I think we're already there now. But oh my God, cockatoos.
I'm enjoying this I think more than you are, so this is great.
Let's watch Phil squirm. But what is loneliness from a clinical perspective? What is it?
Yeah, okay, good question. I'm going to give you an annoying answer. Let me tell you what it's not. So when I think of and full disclosure, when I first started thinking about loneliness, it's I attended something that you attended at the same time. Big shout out to Dr. Lim and her team at Ending Loneliness Together. Is that I really had to study what the differences were. I wanted to make sure that I didn't stuff that up, because loneliness is often confused with a lot of other things. So people talk about, they're alone, they must be lonely, which is totally untrue, right? So I know that I benefit from feeling like I've got a bit of solitude, a bit of space away from others, which is why I talk about, the mountains and going to the mountains. That's where I feel like I have that time to myself, and I enjoy that. That's something that I really want to have for myself, to feel whole, to have that time to plan and to think about, the world around me and what I need, and to reflect on who I am. And I love that. And just to be silly without anyone watching, I love that. That's different. It's a really different quality to being lonely. So lonely is something, and I can experience this myself quite a lot, is when you can be surrounded by so many people. You can have millions of people around you, and you can still feel that same sense of, I don't belong here. So it's what we would call like an undesired state. We don't want to be feeling that way. It's a level of distress attached to it. We don't want to be feeling what we're feeling in that moment. And what we want is connection. And there must be something wrong with us, because there are so many people around us, and we still don't feel like we're connecting. So it's a really normal sensation. And we don't call it it's not a diagnosis. Loneliness is not in itself a mental health issue, but we do know that when that leads to, feelings of self-doubt, starting to question ourselves, that we call it negative emotionality. I don't think any emotion is negative, may I add, because it all tells us something. They're all part of the normal spectrum. But when we're feeling in a way that feels really uncomfortable, creates that discomfort, and we start to judge ourselves as well about that, the longer that endures, the more likely that is to lead to mental health issues. So loneliness is not a nice feeling, and the longer that endures, that can then lead to really catastrophic outcomes for an individual. So loneliness is something that it affects all of us. It's different for all of us. When I see someone that comes, to me and they're lonely and they want to be able to connect with a professional to talk about that, there's no one cookie cutter that fits people that come in and say, I'm feeling lonely. In fact, it's rare that someone comes in and says, I'm lonely, which is part of what we need to talk about, right?
Yeah.
So this is great.
Yeah.
Because we need to remove that stigma, because that's what really makes it endure. It's just like an insidious power.
Yes.
So it looks different for everyone. It's not a mental health issue, and it's not something that just happens because we feel alone. It's because we don't have what we need from our social connections, and we're feeling completely and utterly distressed by it. And that's, it can be catastrophic.
Why do we sit in that state? Why do we choose that state?
Why do we choose that state? Jeez, I want to flip it back on you and say, why did tell me, Phil? Why I just did my silly laugh. Oh no, I sound like a turkey when I laugh like that. Why do we choose that?
Totally not editing that.
Thanks. Why do we choose loneliness? Well, I think a lot of that, there are so many answers that I could give you, but I think a lot of that starts from shame and embarrassment and that fear of being seen to be different. We feel different, but we don't want to put our hands up and say, hey, look, it's me. I might on the outside look like I'm coping, or I might not look like I'm coping, whatever that is for that person, but it's an acknowledgement of the fact that I'm struggling. And maybe because it's not a mental health disorder, I don't know, but it's not as commonly talked about as we want to, until you came along and started doing all of these wonderful podcasts and promoting what loneliness is and how it can manifest in the world. I think until that becomes really part of general conversation, that stigma attached to that, when it's from a community, makes it harder to reach out. And from an individual's perspective, if you do that to yourself, there must be something wrong with me, I can't connect, everyone else manages to do it, then maybe it's not a choice. I guess it's a subconscious choice, isn't it? We don't want to put our hand up and say, hey, I'm struggling.
I think it's a choice. Let's try this on.
It's a difficult choice.
Yeah, it's a difficult choice, but it's a choice almost done by default.
Yeah.
Because
we've done this before, Phil.
It's like I do this thing.
Thank you. You could have said that 5 minutes ago.
No, this is like I kind of still enjoy making people squirm. But I tend to think that the best chats over a podcast come when people are deeply uncomfortable.
Tick.
Oh, well done. I made that joke while you were drinking tea. Well handled. So, it's a choice.
Yeah.
Because choosing, I say this a lot, and listener, viewer, if you've been around the traps a little while, you know that I say this a lot. When you realise that you're lonely, knowing, as you just said, Sarah, that it doesn't need a clinical diagnosis. You don't need to go to a therapist.
Yeah.
You don't need to go to a psychiatrist. You don't need to go to a mental health professional. You just simply need to go within.
Yeah.
And simply. It's not easy.
Yeah.
But
where courage comes on.
Yeah. But the only thing you need to do, there's one thing you need to do, and that's go within.
Yeah.
Not easy,
No.
not fun.
Yeah.
But
all the caveats.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I like the definition of loneliness is, if you feel lonely, then you are lonely. That's it.
Yeah, that's right.
And
it's so individual.
Yeah.
And no one can tell you that you're not lonely, right? You
Exactly.
know it, you feel it.
People do try to tell, how could you be lonely?
Yeah.
Your life was perfect.
Yeah. Which just further exacerbates the whole thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. I've got some great responses to that as well. It's really, Sarah, you're a human, you're a clinical psychologist, like you still get lonely. You know what loneliness is. You know how it happens, and ways out and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't make you immune to the human condition.
No, and sometimes I still have to choose.
Yeah,
like I have to make a conscious decision to do things differently.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have to know what that is.
And that's not fun.
No, it's not fun.
No. But I think if we know we're lonely, and viewer, listener, perhaps an inconvenient truth that I'm about to say here is if you're listening to this and if you're watching this, you've pressed play for a reason. And I really do hope that you're getting some support and encouragement from these words and what Sarah's saying and what I say here. But sooner or later, we could just gather information, because the gathering of the information feels like we're doing something, but all we're getting is more information. And there's a point where the information needs to turn into doing.
Yeah, action.
Yeah. And that's hard because we then hit up against the stigma. We then get, and that's the thing that really takes courage, as well as acknowledging the thoughts and feelings that we might be having within. It's another step.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you think of the impacts of loneliness over time, if that endures, I think there's a real point at which we start to recognise, if you give yourself permission to understand what that discomfort actually feels like for you, then if that feeling endures beyond just feeling that sense of, I don't like this feeling of loneliness, if that turns into that self-loathing or a hopelessness or a helplessness around that situation, then we see so many other, really detrimental mental health outcomes, and it can harm your physical health. It can harm you to a point where even that action becomes really, really challenging. So we almost need to know and learn more about ourselves as we go, to learn what those signs are for ourselves, and it's different for everybody. So the more we understand the discomfort and understand at which point we notice that that's turning from a loneliness that we're just understanding to a loneliness that's enduring into something that's even worse, that makes it even harder to get into action. So it really, I think it's really important for us to start to do that right early on in the piece.
Yeah. Which oftentimes, we can wade into loneliness.
Yeah.
And it can take us, took me years to realise, and I say this in keynotes, it was started essentially right back as in primary school, in when I was 9, or I don't know, for argument's sake. And the decisions that we each make to edit ourselves, to fit in, to be accepted. And every time we make a decision for that, there's a reaction. For every action, there's an equal reaction. And it takes time to come back from loneliness.
Yeah, definitely.
Chronic loneliness.
Yeah.
And this is something, listener, viewer, rant alert, because I say this in pretty much every episode right now, for the past few weeks. It's, and it's not something that we can get a quick answer for. It's not something in a minute and a half reel. It's not something in a 15-second Instagram story. It's not something in a YouTube short. It's not something that we can get from listening to a podcast, even
by 2 people who are very interesting.
Deeply
And if that doesn't work,
you must tell me this podcast. Which is it? I'm gonna write it down.
I like what you're saying, Phil, is that I think it's not something that you get just by listening to something. Even the work that you're doing it requires some internal decision making around what do I subjectively, what's my experience of loneliness? And
Yeah.
I think that's not something that you can get from other people. You can get ideas about what it could feel for other people and when it could occur, which is great for, what we would call as like normalizing the experience and reducing some of that stigma and validating some of the way that you're feeling and saying, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person that I'm feeling this way. It just means that I'm not getting my needs met by my environment, my social connections. I think that that's super important, and that's a really good part of that process of gathering information. But you can't get is that, how am I feeling?
Yes.
What is my subjective experience, and what does my subjective experience mean for me? And at what point in my experience do I then need to start to engage in some of those actions? And that's really, I think it's a really tough thing to learn.
Yeah.
It's a process of learning, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And getting it wrong.
And learning by all of the mistakes, which is hard.
Yes. Yes.
We laugh about it. It's rotten.
I know it's deeply shared.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
and for someone who is a reforming people pleaser, a perfectionist, which is part of the same kind of cycle. Yeah. That's really hard. That's really hard for me. Mm-hmm. And it's a heavy topic, and one that we can be very dour and stuff about. But this is the human condition, and sometimes like recognizing the seriousness, the levity of it, is great. This is life and death stuff.
Yeah, 100%.
Really.
Yeah.
But we can also just sort of go kindly with grace with ourselves and compassion, and just go, oh God, that was pretty funny. Like that was a real clusterfuck.
It's like dusting yourself off and going, whoops. What did I learn from that? And that happens to all of us, you know, and put our hands up. As psychologists do that too. Yeah. And if we can model that that's what we expect of everybody, even when we've been taught all the things and how to do it, we still bugger it up.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yep. Love it. Quote of the episode so far. It's like, we still bugger it up.
It's my tagline.
I think that's awesome. And there needs to be more, buggering, up of like just bringing that into the, the lexicon more now. But I feel,
There's no shame in it, is there, really?
No. And I think, you really touched on what is the difficulty. And that's not the right word, but, the real awfulness of loneliness is that it is tied to shame. Yeah. It's shameful to feel lonely and to essentially come out as lonely. Yeah. We have to wrestle with shame. And do you, I see a lot in my work, very close, what do I call it? Like a troika, like a trio dancing of shame, loneliness, and trauma. Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be capital T trauma or small t trauma, like the trauma of growing up,
Of being human.
Yeah. No one escapes, childhood unscathed. Yes. However perfect their childhood was. And I guess the question here is do you see that?
Yeah, quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we look at just loneliness in general, when we think it's almost that shame leads to a secrecy, right? So if we're surrounded by people and we don't feel like we're getting our needs met, we don't feel like we can talk to people, that they're not seeing who we are and what we've been through, if we're hiding something away and don't have that confidence in being able to say, this is what my experience has been recently, this is the help that I need and I'm really struggling, then that just exacerbates that feeling as well. So that shame around actually saying this is who I am and this is what I've been through, that just makes it more difficult to connect with people, which then amplifies our experience of loneliness. So I think they're constantly intermingled.
Mm.
And it's really, I was going to say interesting. It's not interesting. It's quite sad, I think, to see that people who have been through, you know, whether it's little t or big T traumas, that you know, that's becoming a bit more palatable, and loneliness still has a long way to go. Like, I think, you know, even with the, you know, we've got lots of shame conversations happening and trauma conversations happening, and loneliness is just catching up. So it's great that it is, but it's really interesting that they're all so closely intermingled, and that we're only just being able to catch up about loneliness. So I think the benefit of that will be is if we amplify the importance of what loneliness is, what it means for us all, and what we can do differently to manage that and to tack it, is hopefully that will have a nice influence, a positive influence on people's experience of being able to talk about their trauma and being able to be open about, you know, the shame associated with some of the traumatic experiences that they had. Even just some of the things that we experience day to day of was that just me, or was there something wrong with me when I was growing up? Like, why did I feel lonely in that situation?
Yeah.
Because I feel like everyone else is, you know, would do that and not have a problem with it.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? So I think it's with a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, exactly. I'm down for it. Because I think one of the things here that, like, it's coming up for me is sometimes Winnie the Pooh is a very good kind of analogy to draw here, because it feels at times that the world expects us all to be Tiggers. And sometimes we're Eeyore. Yeah. And I think there's lessons in Winnie the Pooh. Like, Eeyore is not shunned. He's not excluded. He's not, you know, can just go away to, you know, a mental health professional and, you know, go and, like, sort yourself out. Get sorted out and then come back and, you know, we can have another Tigger. Yeah. But it feels that the world expects me, like, I'll personalize it, to be Tigger. And there's this relentless, this expectation to be relentlessly positive. I don't like using the word toxic positivity, because I think that's unnecessarily or unhelpfully like pejorative. It's you know, but I think
you don't want to be judgmental in other direction, right?
No. And if someone's, you know, like, you know, I'm normally, you know, very fun and, you know, all that kind of stuff, even in my loneliness.
Yeah.
Like, the jokes, the tiggerness covered the Eeyore.
Yeah, well and truly. I see that a lot with a lot of the people I've seen over the years, especially those that are in professions where they have to have an air of, I've got everything together. Like, I know my stuff. Ask me a question, I can answer it straight out. Yeah, I know.
That's me. Listener on the podcast, I have my hand up. Yes.
So there, I mean, and that's a really, like, fertile ground for loneliness, isn't it? Because if we're meant to be a certain way in order to look competent, to be able to do what we need to do day to day, even if we're doing that and we're still feeling like we don't belong, like we're lonely, I mean, what on earth does that mean about us?
Yeah.
So it becomes individual, doesn't it, rather than a societal issue.
Yeah. You're so good at what you do. Like, you just read my head. Yeah. Because it is. It's like there's this like the burden of expectations that we feel are on us, but also that we put upon ourselves.
Yes.
These unrealistic, superhuman expectations that, you know, we're meant to have it all, like, it all sorted. Yeah. Like, know every answer, know exactly what's going on, and we fear not.
I had conversations like that today with people in the workplace, just talking about, you know, how they always feel like they have to be on, like wearing that professional mask. I've got this, everything's fine. And it, you know, it can be motivating sometimes to feel like you have to keep going, and that can be adaptive, right? At times that can be really, really helpful. But when that becomes problematic and we don't then learn how to switch that off, that's when we really start to struggle. It's when the adaptive becomes completely maladaptive.
Yeah.
And I genuinely had those conversations today. I won't share them because that's but there's a sense of at what point because I think there's a different thing to, it's okay to sometimes not share some of the stuff that we're experiencing, right? So we have to do that in a safe way. We have to trust the people that we're sharing some of this stuff with. So it's okay to say, I'm okay for the minute. I'm doing what I need to do, and then ensuring that we follow that up. If we're not feeling quite right, it's actually finding that a safe place to be able to discuss, with the person that we trust, with the professional that we trust, or just with ourselves, to be able to say, actually, that was really tough. Why was that tough? What does that say about me?
Yeah.
Do I need a break? Do I need to do something? Do I need to call a friend? What do I need to do? We don't have to tell everybody our secrets, because that can be really hard too, because if that person's not ready to hear that, it's going to further invalidate us, or at worst, they will negatively judge us, which reinforces some of that potential self-stigma. So
yeah, it's like you just described my former workplace. Which we've discussed before. Yes. I'm keen to change tack on this, and one of the things that I explore with my guests is, if we are going to normalize conversations of loneliness, then, we need to talk about loneliness. And I understand that this, it's not fun or whatever, but I feel it's often like this great leveler, and makes it human. Yeah. And I'm curious, can you share with us an experience of loneliness that you've had, if you can?
Yeah. Caveat to this is,
yes,
as a psychologist, we don't often talk about ourselves. So I both feel privileged to be able to do that, but also a little bit awkward because I don't know what this is going to sound like. So Phil, for everyone listening and potentially watching, I'm aware that now you can see my face. That's really cool. Phil was very kind and gave me some of these questions to think about beforehand, and I noticed when I was reading that question, Phil, as I was thinking, I think the way that you asked me the question was, how has loneliness been helpful to you sometimes? And that was it's a great question. And so when I used to think about my own loneliness, it didn't feel helpful at the time, and it's only now that perhaps I'm more aware of myself and maybe just older and realise that I'm human and fallible and all of these things, that I can now look and see actually how helpful that was for me at the time. So when you asked me that question, I was thinking, gosh, what do I pick? Because there's so many times that I felt lonely, because when I think, you mentioned being 9 when you first recognised it. I probably may have felt even younger than that when I first noticed that I was first lonely. And that's because I grew up in a really nice suburb, but I was, the worst house in the best street. So already I felt like a little bit like I didn't really belong in that sort of an environment. And then went to this beautiful little school, I really still love it now, where I was like one of those kids that had to get a scholarship in order to go there. So I was already a little bit not quite fitting in. I was a special case. Yeah. So that made me try really hard to fit in. And that's a really hard thing to do, as you know. So I think from an early age I was really aware of what that's like, and my natural response to that is to work harder. Work harder at being cool, work harder at being accepted, work harder at being smarter, or wearing the right clothing, or just, when we say it out loud it seems silly, doesn't it?
No, but it's perfectly, it's makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And I think that probably, that was, earlier on, that was one of those moments where I thought, wow, I'm going to have to keep working hard. And I think that some of that has continued throughout my whole life, of that feeling like when I went to university, still the same. I moved to a different state, didn't know anybody, was used to being, known, came from a small place, used to being known, and all of a sudden I was, in a class of 350, in a place I didn't really know, and my grades started to not be what they used to be. So, and I thought there was something like I just needed to keep working harder in order to achieve those grades that I was used to. But the reality is, I think I was just feeling really, really lonely. I didn't have a social circle that I could rely on. I didn't want to call anyone at home going, I hate it, because I wanted to be independent and show them that I could do all of this. So it was really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, having to pretend that everything's okay.
Which I've been using this expression, it's not the right one, but becomes I was going to say this becomes a self-licking ice cream, but that's not. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
really
what
does.
I was looking for. Yeah.
It really does. And I think I could talk for hours about all the little instances where I found little kernels of who I want to be in the world and how I could slowly change that. And I think that part of me doing that was actually admitting that I can't do it all at the same time for everybody. And sometimes we kind of fall over when that happens, right? So working 3 jobs, trying to do all my grades, just realised this I can't do. I just can't continue to do that. And I think there were little things that I noticed that helped and little things that didn't. So reaching out, I've got a collection of sisters who are lovely, and I know that reaching out to them in different ways made a big difference to me. I know my sister, when I'd moved interstate, she made the effort to come and visit. And I have never felt more at ease. I was like, oh, thank goodness, maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something about actually making the effort to reach out and actually talk to someone about, this is not quite right, I don't feel quite right.
Yeah.
But, I think it depends on how comfortable you feel with that person. So, and slowly but surely, like I know that even now I work in environments where I can't talk necessarily about all the things that I hear. Like, as a psychologist, we can't go and say, hey, I talked to a client, they said this, blah, blah, blah. We can't share all the things about the work that we do, which sometimes, especially if you're working alone, can be quite isolating.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. The loneliness of, I've said this a couple of times, there's an ironic loneliness to working on loneliness.
Yeah, it's true.
And like the loneliness of caring.
Yeah. I think the more you care for others, the harder it is sometimes to put your hand up and saying, I need help, because you don't want to burden them either, which is really like a double whammy.
There's that word.
Yeah.
There's that word. Don't want to be a burden.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a really hard thing to unwind, isn't it?
I hear that all the time.
Yeah. I can imagine you would.
I've said that all the time. Like, I pioneered it. Like, no one ever... No one did it before me.
Imagine a flag pioneering the burden. Yeah.
It's like turning into this socialist statue of it's like, follow me everyone, to burden grad. I'd said that so many, I still say that. That's like my flag.
Yeah, it would be one of mine too.
Yeah. It's like, oh no, I don't want to call them they're busy. They're like, I'm about to say burden.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, no, Phil.
Yeah.
Like, no.
So what do you do when you notice that?
It's like, no, I remind myself of my worthiness for love and belonging.
Yeah, nice.
And, they might not be able to talk now, but, I'd reach out and go, can we get a coffee?
Yeah.
In the next few days.
Yeah.
And, if they don't pick up the hint, then I'll be like, no, I really need to talk. Listen.
Actually, I don't really want to. I need to. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And, send a text and, do you have a moment?
Yeah.
I need to have a chat, or something. And here, culturally, people are like, if you need anything, call me or whatever, but, we can take that as that's an empty thing to say.
Yeah.
That's a platitude.
Yeah.
But we need to push past that platitude and actually take people up on the offer so that if they don't mean it, they don't say it.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Because when you say that, you mean it.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I know now the value of someone who can simply sit and listen and go, well, that seems pretty shit.
Yeah.
What do you need?
Yeah.
Rather than, all right, let's Google how to fix this. Let's, oh, you poor thing, the pity response. Yeah. What about you? How do you notice it?
How do I notice it now? Probably notice it in different ways depending on the context in which I feel lonely. So professionally, if I start to feel like I am lonely, usually it can manifest as my I can't necessarily make sense of my thoughts in a really nice coherent way. So we do, as psychologists, we do what's called a formulation. So when we're talking to somebody, we're trying to work out from all the theories that we've learned and the interventions that we've learned, we're trying to work out what someone's history, what are their the challenges that they're having at the minute, and what sort of triggered those challenges at the minute, and what are those things that are going to keep them safe, and what can we do to influence that in a really positive way. So that's where we call like a nice round formulation of a human to try and work out how we can best assist them to achieve that. If I'm feeling lonely and isolated, my brain can't do that very well. I just can't naturally make those connections, and sometimes even when I'm talking to somebody in the moment, my brain's not entirely with them. I'm not as present with them as I normally would be and as I want to be. So then I notice that little judgment, oh my gosh, if I'm not focused, what's wrong with me? This is so rude. This is not what I'm being paid for. This is not, for me, that's not human connection.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want to be. So as soon as I notice some of that, that difficulty concentrating and that difficulty being present, for me, that's a professional sign that I'm feeling lonely and I need to talk that through. So I, big shout out again, I see an incredible clinical psychologist on, fortnightly, monthly basis to ensure that doesn't happen. So I'm proactively trying to get my dose of connection as like a preventative action.
Yes. Yeah.
So for me, that's really that's essential for the work that I do, because when I don't achieve that and I can't be present, I'm a psychologist second, I think, being humans first, and it just morphed into being a psychologist. So if I can't be present with someone, eventually, if that happens in a professional sense, I start to see that show up in my personal life. So I feel like I'm not able to be present with the people that I love. Yeah. Yeah. So I can't. Not only can I not do my job, but then I can't be with the people that make me want to be here doing my job. So that's a really different experience as well. That hits me hard in here. Like I feel really like I'm missing a left leg. Yeah. So, and often sometimes my appetite tends to decrease when I'm feeling that way. So I'm like, I notice that I'm forgetting to eat, and I'm too busy, and I'm not getting that beautiful cuddle from like my big burly teenagers, and I need to feel close to them. So that's usually when I annoyingly say, let's do something together. And they go, okay, Mum. So yeah, it's different. I think it hits my soul more when it's personal loneliness. And the way that I remedy that is connection, but connection in a different way. So usually it's like everyone bundled on the couch, dogs, humans, all of us together. That feels right. That makes me, resets me.
Yeah.
It's a different quality. Yeah.
That's awesome. Like it's beautiful, not just like the throwaway awesome. Because one of the things that I'm getting there from this area is like there's loneliness in the mind and then loneliness in the heart and soul.
Yeah.
And I wonder, when you're talking about professional loneliness and you're not being able to sort of be present and form that holistic view, I forget the word that you said, but formulation, that holistic formulation, of someone's present, their circumstances, their history, and sort of bring that together in a way that perhaps they can't because they're living it, but you're not able to be there to serve them in that way. That the connection that you would be having, if things were going well and you were feeling connected and calm and present and all that kind of stuff, you'd be able to be there like heart and soul in that space for them.
Yes.
And it's almost like the creeping in of the thoughts are like
they're my flags.
like a cloud coming over, on a sunny day, and getting between you and like the connective sun. That really was
very... It makes me actually think of something. Thanks, Jill.
No, go.
Often when I work a bit with couples and often, loneliness is quite, it's quite apparent in some relationships that I see when work has become a focus or there's been a significant event in their lives personally, the death of a family member or something like that. And that loneliness can coexist, although they're partnered and see each other every day, right? So often the way that some of these couples describe it is that they can see that the person's there, their partner's there, they're around their house, they're doing stuff, they're in their area, right? But between them is almost this pane of glass, and on this pane of glass, they're forgetting to look at their partner, they're forgetting to see their partner for who they are. And on this pane of glass, you've got all of the thoughts that are in their head, like, can't believe she said that, it's like, what would she know? I wish she'd be quiet. He always says that. Like, there are all these thoughts, usually negative, about that person, and they're failing then to see through those thoughts. Through that pane of glass, it's slowly just covering, all those negative thoughts are covering that pane of glass, so they can't see the person that they fell in love with, and that creates this slow disintegration. That connection. So it's about rehearsing, being present. Right? Removing that pane of glass, which is not easy.
No. I want to flag in probably next year some content Jeff and I have been talking about that and how we do that in our relationship. Clean the glass. I know. So I feel. Thank you for sharing that. Like before I move on, it's always a privilege to hear someone's story of loneliness, because it's really the story of life. And I think right back at the very beginning when I'm like, so Sarah, introduce yourself, and you're like, it's like, and it can be like, okay, well, I went to this uni between these years, and then I work here between these years. It's like, your LinkedIn profile or, with your CV.
And it's a nice linear way, isn't it? Right? Like, through the years I've done this and I've done that. But it's not who you are necessarily, is it?
And after a lifetime of being surrounded by people who were spectacularly awesome, academically, professionally, and striving very hard myself to be awesome or as awesome. I never quite matched up in my own mind, academically and professionally. Frankly, evidently, like, you're smart. Like, you know your shit. And if that could be
thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
If that could be my quote to you, it's like, put that on your CV. It's like, I know my shit.
Thanks.
But like, in my previous job, like, I be around, walking the halls of power, and like our country's ministers and other countries' ministers and senior bureaucrats and stuff, and people who breathe rarefied air. They're still human.
Yeah, that's right.
Beneath it all. And I really, it's great how, someone chooses to spend their life, or whatever qualifications that they've been, able to get, or, or not, or how they've chosen to, to show up in service in the world. Really interesting. But I'm here for the human. I'm here for the human who's doing the things.
You certainly are.
Yeah. Oh, good. Because that's where the interesting thing is, and that was the whole sort of kernel of that question. Is like, one of the things that I'm deeply fascinated about are those pivot points in life.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we sort of go through that, like the retelling of our CV, you know, or in that 30-second intro that we've got, like, I want to keep on going back and going, no, what was about that pivot point? Like, what was going on there? Like, you know, and
It's fascinating.
isn't it?
Aren't we lucky to do what we do?
Yeah. It's like, you know, we get to like, oh, what was the pivot point? It's like, oh, like, and, you know, some of the people that I've spoken to on the podcast, outside of the podcast, have just sort of, it's hit them that loneliness was this kind of spectre looming in the shadows, like, you know, Voldemort. Like they which must not be named. But the presence was there, and you know, we made decisions based on fear or recognizing that there was no other choice. And that to me is deeply fascinating.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you were talking about that, I think I'm going to do another bit of a sharing
Yeah.
really quickly. I think of it was interesting when I first had my first child. I was really excited to be pregnant, really excited to have a baby boy, and being at home with him was wonderful. But I felt really lonely. At home. He couldn't necessarily talk back to me all the time. And I felt, again, that cognitive and that heart thing, I felt like just there's something wasn't quite right. And I remember at the time saying I'd like to go back and do some study, which is, you know, where I started to be a psychologist. But I remember some of the judgment attached to that when I was like, I really don't feel quite right. And I remember, this is, 17 years ago, that there wasn't that acceptance back then to say, I'm really not quite right. You know, after having this child, I feel lonely. I don't want to be in this feeling. And going back to study was something that helped me, gave me that cognitive, not a distraction, but something to do whilst he was sleeping, or something to keep my mind active. But it wasn't necessarily talked about. So I think that Voldemort was really strong for me at that time, and I didn't even speak to too many people about that. And when I have, earlier on the piece, there was a little judgment attached to that. It's like, how on earth could she feel that way? He's beautiful. Of course he is. I'm still really lonely.
Yes, he's you know, he's a beautiful baby, and I still need
and that, you know, when I hear others say that now, it's not as stigmatized.
No.
Which is, that's really great to hear.
That's progress.
Yeah, it is progress. So, thanks. Good memories.
And
how far we've come.
and I think like that's the shit. Is like right there is, you know, that point, because we gloss over it, and you know, and generally it's like, you know, oh, and then I did this. It's like, oh, no, like let's go back, because that's where the lessons, like the lessons that can help others. Because we see ourselves in that struggle.
100%.
Like
and
the
that
context.
Is a turning point, isn't it?
Like the words might be different. Might not be, you know, pregnancy, giving birth, having, you know, a bouncing baby boy, and, you know, going off to study. Like those words might be different.
Yes.
But, you know,
the progression could be the same, right? Can't it?
Yeah.
The feelings could be similar.
Absolutely.
The way we see ourselves can be similar.
Absolutely.
In completely different situations.
This has been a fantastic chat. How are you going?
I feel like I could keep talking because I kind of forgot what I was doing. Until you said that.
It happened. I told you it would. Sarah, I'm really excited. Like, there's a bit of a special announcement, isn't there?
Yes, there is a special announcement.
So, viewer, listener, I am deeply, deeply committed to showing up in service and support of you as you are experiencing loneliness. Not only that, I'm here to challenge and inspire you. And challenging, you know, I get a little bit of fun from that. But we move from loneliness to connection when we get uncomfortable. And That's when we do change, is when what we're moving from is more uncomfortable than the change that we're moving towards. And when it comes to loneliness, I often talk about the comfortable misery that we stay in our loneliness because we think that we don't deserve anything better. What I am really committed to doing is to meeting you where you are and how you are and wherever you are in the world. And I appreciate that sometimes, like, the service beyond the blog and the podcast and social media content is confronting. It takes courage to take another step. And so over the past few months, I have been working to, like, things needed to change. And there is only one of me. And I'm deeply, like, I live and breathe this stuff. And, you know, I'm here for an impact, and there's only so much that I can do by myself, as awesome as I am. And over the past few months, I've been building a team of people who have skills, experience, and just sort of amazing humans who aren't me, who also share the vision for destigmatizing loneliness and helping you get the authentic connection that you need and deserve. And I'm really happy to say, you could say it.
I'm part of your team. Exciting.
Absolutely. Sarah is part of the team. And g'day to the rest of the team. Yeah.
I got to have this announcement. I feel really special. That's a real privilege.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, I feel like I should share that with them. Thank you.
I know, we need to take a photo and send it to them as well. But there's a team, so we will sort of do a bit more of a formal introduction, but there's Pete in Brisbane, and he is helping with marketing.
He's a lovely person.
Yeah, don't say that.
Oh,
like, you know.
Shh. We'll get to know him.
Yeah. No, like, it goes with that. Like, the people who are in the team, listener and viewer, they're spectacularly awesome humans in their own right. Yeah. And they are very committed to showing up in service and support in alignment with the vision for the loneliness guy. And so I've got Pete in Brisbane, who is marketing. There's Jack in Melbourne.
He's really funny too.
Isn't he?
Yeah.
Isn't he?
I feel like now I'm getting a little snippet about all the team, but I'll just...
You can editorialise.
Yeah.
And we're going to throw to Sarah for comments.
Whether Phil likes it or not.
And
zip it.
Yeah, please don't. So Jack with sales. And over in Toronto, there's Star Stemper, who is kind of bringing it all together as the business manager. There's Jonathan in Sydney, helping with finance. And then there's Jeff here from this house, who is also helping with vision and also, like, helping make sure that I stay me. Yeah. In all of this. Important. And there's Sarah, who is, as you now know, listener and viewer, is spectacularly awesome at what she does, knows, like, a lot of stuff. And beyond sharing your awesomeness with, with everyone, one of the things that I'm really focused on doing, like, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not, I don't have a degree or anything.
You can't be everything, Phil.
No, but I'm me. Like, I'm very good at, at serving, supporting, challenging, and inspiring in my way. But listener, viewer, we're creating services and products through those services that are designed to meet you where you are and how you are, and at different points, frankly, of where you are, and so you can begin to take meaningful steps and know that those steps have been done with your interests firmly in the center at heart, and that the content of that support has been done in conjunction and like with oversight from Sarah. And what's then happening is that, we write the words and we do the things, and we want to make sure that you're getting the best quality advice and support that helps you take a step.
I get the easy job, really, like Phil. You've put all this time and work and effort into working out what it is that's actually really needed. And I think, that's why we all feel very fortunate to be part of the team, and it feels like a natural thing for us to do, is because you've been brave enough to come out and talk about what it is that you needed when you didn't have it, and what you've learned from that experience. So really, like, the clinical oversight that I have is a joy, and it's the easy part of the whole process for me. So thank you. It's a privilege to be part of it.
Yeah, I've just got huge plans, like maybe not plans, but a huge vision for this work, because it is absolutely needed, whether the world wants it or not. Like, is ready for it or not, it's needed. And knowing that there are fantastic people like you, Sarah, who are, by my side, but by each other's side. And being able to call forward, call out, share, the expertise, and frankly be human. That's the most important thing. I'm like, I'm done with, being, government corporate guy. It's like, no, I'm here to be human and be surrounded by other humans who are making it up as they go along as well.
We're just practicing all that we've been preaching the whole way along this conversation, aren't we?
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
And I think, when we think about how human the experience of loneliness is that what you're doing and these beautiful products are going to be accessible by so many people. And you're doing that from beautiful Ngunnawal country.
Yes.
But it's going to be accessible for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's a huge advantage. When I think of, the work that we do as psychologists, there are only so many of us. We can't do all this work, and that, being in a position where you can share your experiences, share that with others, validate their experience, and create a product that can meet anyone where they're at, I think that has so much power. And if part of me really being excited, amongst the whole personal thing that I love being part of your team, but part of the professional benefit of that is that when we all work together for the same cause, doing the same thing, we can have greater impact across the world, can't we? So not only is that giving individual supports, but we're decreasing and destigmatizing everything about loneliness as we're doing that, and we're getting such a far reach when we do that. So we're going to teach others how to do that as well.
Yep.
So that's what a joy.
Yep.
Aren't we lucky?
Yeah. No one teach one. No. Yeah. So we all know how to speak of our loneliness. We know how to receive other people's stories of loneliness without judgment, without resorting to pity or fixing it for them. And, it feels like a life's work. Feels like a purpose.
Yeah, I want to do the little clap that I do when I'm excited, but I don't want it to minimise the experience, but I get really excited by that. Well, that's cool.
Can you just keep yourself under control?
I made you no promises when we first started in the morning.
So, we're going to be having a lot of fun. We're going to be challenging ourselves. We're going to be challenging how things are done in a good way, questioning the status quo. And sometimes, this goes to part of the loneliness of it, when you're forging a new path, something that hasn't been done or not many people have done or have made work.
Yeah.
That this then, it's a richer experience having fantastic people by your side. Yeah. And I can't help but think, listener, viewer, this is to you. I can't help but think that this wouldn't be happening if I didn't sit and acknowledge and own my loneliness. And it wouldn't have happened if I then didn't get curious about my loneliness. And following that curiosity is, who knows where it will take us. But, that's what I'm doing.
Do you know what I love about you, Phil? Is that when you
How
say
many
that...
things?
How many things? Try and contain it to one sentence.
This is an appropriate time to be a clapping thing too.
But when you say that, like I'm watching you say that to the listener and to the viewer, I believe 100% what you're saying right in front of me now. But you know what I do is I feel that too. Like I know that that's been what you've wanted to achieve ever since I met you.
Yeah.
I think that's what gravitated to you in that first moment when I met you. So for those of you at home listening, or wherever you might be, you might not be at home, you might be on your bike, I don't know. Hopefully not watching whilst you're on your bike. That's
no, let's be safe, people.
Safety first. We met at an event where, I was very worried about sounding professional and having all of the statistics in my head, which have gone out the window today apparently. And I was speaking and then all in my own head and then sat down, and then this charismatic man stands up and just uses language in a way that described your experience of loneliness in such a way that I felt like you were talking to me completely personally, like I was the only one in the room, and you were using the words in a way that described so much of not what I've just felt myself, but what all of the people who have come to see me over the years have been describing. And I thought, this is someone that I would like to get to know more. And I think I said it the other day, is that I kind of met this kind of like beeline towards you, like, hello, congratulations, that was brilliant. I had like a bit of a starstruck moment. But you do, I don't want to get too serious about it, but you really do walk the talk. So I think that's why this product and all that will come beyond this is such a meaningful thing, because it's your work and your self and everything that's made you shared really generously with the rest of the world. And thank you.
I'm tearing up. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I have to say, listener, viewer, so Sarah and I were talking at the same loneliness event at Parliament House in Canberra last August. And it incidentally was my very last day in the public service.
It's a big day.
Yeah. And Sarah went immediately before me, and I couldn't sit still. So I had to get up and I was down at the back kind of pacing a bit, and all these speakers, one after another, kind of just went up and to the podium and did their thing and dispatched it, and everyone's like, oh my God, this is interesting. I'm like, I can't watch people. I can't do this. I just need to, be me. I need to hide in a pot plant or something like that and just put headphones on or something. And then, Sarah went up in her awesome way, quietly just sort of spoke about the challenges for psychologists in talking about loneliness, and how, my words, how underprepared people are to talk about loneliness. Yeah. And again, my words, you may have been saying something different, but...
It's okay, you're in a pot plant.
Yeah. That's very true. But anyway, I was trying to focus, but also I'm next, shit, I'm next. I'm next. I'm calm down. And, I kept on thinking of things to say, and so I'm like madly scribbling in pencil in the margin of my notes and things. I'm like, oh my God, 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 oh my God. And anyway, I get up there and I'm like, oh, and I sort of, was looking around at the room. Listener, viewer, I made people cry.
Definitely.
And I remember looking at you, Sarah, and you were just like, on the edge of your seat. And just like, I'm like, okay, that feels like a safe space in the audience.
I was possibly doing this, exactly what I'm doing. I was listening to you now going, yes. Yes, I hear you.
Yeah. And then I went to sit back down in my seat because I could finally sit down, and you were sitting right behind me. And you were like the first person who just like, just sort of leant in and you're like, that was great. And I was like,
I can breathe now.
Yeah. But it is something that I'm very much called to do. And lucky, very working hard at it, but putting myself out there in more and more places, so we can, as a society, wherever we are in the world, have better language. Talk about belonging and the search for belonging, and talk about the language of loneliness. So I'm so glad that you're here.
Me too.
And viewer, listener, I'm really just grateful so much that you've joined for this episode. It's been an episode that has really underscored the importance of what we're doing here. And I can say we now because it's not just me. Yeah. And so, this is you're not alone. Absolutely, you're not alone. And if you've made it this far into the video, if you've made it this far into the podcast, beyond potentially some initial curiosity about, this episode, I want you to really know deep down that you are absolutely not alone. You are not broken. You don't need fixing. Your loneliness simply needs some understanding. So you can then listen to it. And we're here to support you with that. All of us. Having a few laughs along the way as well. But so if you've got any questions, of course, please do respond in the... I'll be giving you all the details of how you can do that once the chat with Sarah's done. But Sarah, have you got anything final that you wanted to say?
Look, I've got a lot to say. I don't know whether or not I should be saying on this. Just thank you. So you've made this really easy. I think you just do belonging really well. And I'm not someone who likes doing this stuff all the time. So thank you.
Not at all.
I feel like I'm okay. We're all as well with the world.
Yeah.
Right here, right now. Thank you.
Yeah. This is the first of many times that you're going to be on the podcast, you realise.
That's a promise, not a threat.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Absolute promise. It's we're just going to put a recorder on the table between us when we have coffee, and we can sort of capture some of this lightning that we do. But Sarah, thank you so very much for joining us for tea, coffee, a beverage.
Yes. Thank you to the listeners and the watchers, the viewers.
And the watchers.
And the watchers. That's another episode. See you, everyone.
Viewer, thank you so much. I think we're just going to be laughing about that for a little while yet. But just thank you so much. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments, do all the things. There's going to be an email address there that you can send it, or reach out in socials. There is no wrong way of doing it. But we're all here for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And Sarah, just thanks for being spectacularly awesome.
Thanks, Phil. Right back at you.